Hello, welcome to the 8th day of January 2022. I'm Kurt, and this is my Good Life meditation. I do this every day to remind myself of my objectives and principles, and to think about how I applied them yesterday and how I plan to apply them today. Let's start. Yesterday, I had a couple of opportunities to avoid gossip, cases where I was in a situation with someone and it would be so easy to talk about others, and I didn't. I chose silence instead, and I'm proud of myself for that. Other than that, it was a pretty straightforward day. Slept really well last night, although I went to bed a little bit late, so I could have used a little more sleep last night. Let's do my Good Life Creed. The 7 objectives are to 1. Be always ready to die. 2. To make good and effective use of time. 3. To develop and maintain good and sound life principles. 4. To cultivate good emotional reaction. Here come the dogs. Hi, Rudy. Next is to perform good actions. Or did I just say that? Hi, Ollie. After that is to recognize my true limits and true opportunity, and then to do one thing at a time and to do that thing slowly, just as I'm doing this in a very careful and deliberate manner. Hi, go ahead and lay down. We'll go for a walk in just a minute. Good boy. Now my 30 principles. The principle of war. To always be in a position of fighting against what I think is true, and anything of importance that others propose to me is true. 2. Reason, and the sub-principles of honesty, objectivity, and doubt. That's how I work to discern what is true, through the use of my reason. Next is the homunculus. The homunculus. The concept of a little mortal that lives inside my head. In fact, my consciousness, that is soon going to wink out and die when I do. Likewise you. After that comes the Anchorhold. The idea that the homunculus is alone on a rock in a sea, where the tide rises and falls, and the water means death. Then comes the home of good and evil. The idea that what is right and wrong are just opinions that I hold in my mind, like words written in chalk on an open face of stone, soon to weather and blow away, far from indelible. Next is purpose. My life has 3 purpose. These are biology, to have a child or children, and to raise that child to adulthood, and they're successfully out on their own, and then be there for them until I'm gone. 2 is virtue, to live a virtuous life, where virtue is defined as activities that promote the well-being of thinking creatures, where well-being is improved happiness and a sense of living well. And then finally, the third purpose is to have some mission in life. My mission was to live a life that was a challenging one, and then to record what I discovered. And I did so in my book, Going Alone, where these objectives and principles are written. And you can find this book on Amazon, and you can also pick it up at my website, goingalone.org. If you buy it from the website, you get a signed copy. The next principle is the atomic principle. Everything is made of bits and pieces that are flowing and changing, forever transforming. Then comes the principle of nature. Everything has some particular nature, and it's good to remember what that is, to recognize it, and to, if not abide it, to at least be aware of it and live with an understanding of what that is. I'm thinking now about a circumstance with someone that I know that has a particular nature. And I'm living, do I say around that? I'm living accepting that fact. And it makes things so much easier. It doesn't make the challenges go away, but it makes them easier to manage and to live with. Next comes the pirate ride. A simple hypothesis that free will is an illusion, that the choices that we make are the only choices that we would have ever made, although we're free to make any choice we like, strange as that sounds. Next comes maturity and the sub-principles of wisdom and fortitude. We are mature when we are remembering our lives and able to avoid our mistakes or work to improve our avoidance of them, or at least manage them when they come around again. And when we live well, capitalizing on our successes. Next comes the social principle. We are social animals. We need each other, and our best ends are social ends. Next is public speaking. The suggestion to be very careful about our communications, to use words that are well considered, deliberate, carefully constructed sentences with wide margins where necessary. Margins between our utterances, the space between our speaking, the quiet should be enough to allow others to fit in, and to allow our words not to be just racing out, but to a better fit to the life that we live in, the world we're engaging with. Next comes temperance and the sub-principles of suffering, simplicity, and apathy, where temperance is our controlled consumption of the world. Food, drink, and our activities, our work, what we do for recreation, how we spend our time. Measured indulgence, even our thinking. Next comes the horror show. Life, though a beautiful thing and a wonder to be sure, is nevertheless chock full of absolute, grade A, cinema quality, that cinema quality, I didn't like the way that came out. what I'm trying to convey is, worse than what you can find in the movies. Horror going on in your town and mine right now, all around us, very nearby. And it will come to us too. Now, I don't include this principle to dwell on that fact, but simply to remind myself so that I'm not surprised when I encounter it, so that I can be actively working daily to counter it, if not directly, then incidentally, through the way that I choose to live my life. The horror show. Pardon me. The next principle is called that which must be borne. I put it deliberately after the horror show because often the stuff that we have to bear in life is the stuff that's the consequence of the horror show. And there's other things too. Going to a job that sometimes you don't like, paying bills that seem to be more than we can handle, making mistakes and living with the consequences, etc., etc. So the sub-principle there is to keep our hand on the tiller and steer the craft towards the sunrise. Steady she goes. Next comes the Feast of Offal. When we lose our cookies and get upset, throw out our upset into the world, we are like children throwing a tantrum with their food. But it's more disgusting than that, because adult tantrums are anything but cute. Others take it seriously. They watch it almost, chumping popcorn, like in a voyeuristic manner. But it infects them, and it impacts them, it soils them. It's hard to walk away from such a sight without a stain. And that tends to molder and grow, and then perhaps eventually become our own feast that we throw out into the world, if not in public, maybe in private to our family and friends. And that's not a good thing to do. So I try to avoid it by, one, not engaging in the feast of others, but being there to help if they need help. But moving aside and letting their tantrum carry on without being splattered with a banana peel in the face. But I'm, again, not giving up, not leaving them to their own devices, but just keeping a safe distance while the danger is at hand. And then, two, by suppressing my own feast, my own want to perform the feast in a healthy way. Getting really good at that. If I do say so myself, at recognizing ambush and simply suppressing it. Simply saying, nah, you're not going to have a tantrum. You're not going to get upset, Kurt. You're not going to let anybody know that you're having a moment. You're just going to live with that. And contrary to the way I was raised, it doesn't come back. It's not like it builds up like a pressure inside. It just goes away. And I weather it. I think it's a more stoic perspective. It's like the Anchorhold, the sea simply withdraws. Next comes distraction. We live our lives distracting ourselves from something that we do not want and we do not want to see, which is, the next principle, the great indifference. That awful emptiness of the universe beyond the pale light our home and hearth. Few want to see that. Few want to meet it. Fewer still want to meet it. Yet it's there, a universe that suggests that there is no life after death and there is no God. We're just here for a brief flashing moment in joy and pain, like a splat of water simmering on a skillet. Sizzle, 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 pop, 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 and gone. That's us. Gone into just evaporating into its component parts. The atomic principle again. We don't want to see that. So we make up stories. We distract ourselves with all the things that we can do in life. So many hobbies and connections and so much gossip. And then we tell ourselves stories that there's someone who loves us and he's got a plan. And if we just follow that plan, then when we die, we'll stay forever with him. And I'll see you again there too. Unless you're bad. And then we'll never see each other again. And won't you be sorry? It's just a comforting fairy tale. It's just wishful thinking. There is absolutely no reason to think that our minds exist after we're dead. The concept of a soul has no foundation or basis for reality. And God remains eternally elusive, supported by faith, which is a vacant proposition. So I choose not to live in such a fantasy and comfort myself with such faint propositions. I'll face the great indifference. I'll go out to meet it. I'll see that it isn't there. And I'll reconcile that fact and live accordingly. I'll live well in spite of that fact. And when I come to die, I will go to that death immediately, or maybe in a drawn-out manner, possibly in great pain and suffering. But I'll go to that death reconciled that I go to oblivion, which appears the destination for all life, ultimately. Unless you've made a kid, in which case some bit of you carries on in a way. As mute comfort as that is. All right. I kind of got ahead of myself with that one. Talked about the complete oblivion. After distraction comes, and the great indifference comes, the best seat in the house. A very simple principle that says, try to be okay with who I am and where I am and what I'm doing, wherever that is, whatever manifestation I take, all my imperfections. It doesn't mean I have to live with those things, but I'll be all right with it while I work to make it better. Then comes the path of wildness. It's a strategy to recognize where we can improve, to decide our next move, to collect facts. And if we're not completely convinced by our facts, then to nudge ourselves with our gut feelings and move and take action and move forward and go forward. That is the path. It's easy to find. It's the course of a stream. It's the direction of leaves blown in the wind. It's the path that a beast makes, trekking through the brush. And ultimately, it's the direction of our first inclination. That is the path of wildness. Then comes the risk of avoiding risk. Everybody in life recommends a few things for the most part. I can't imagine there's very many who don't recommend at least some semblance of these items, if not all of them. These are to become educated, to get a job, to find a partner, to buy a home, to make a family, to save money for retirement. And because there's almost such universal support for these activities, I call these the surface level risks, because they're more easily acquired. It doesn't mean that they're easily acquired, but they're more easily acquired because they have the support of everybody around us for the most part to do so. But there is a risk for some, not all, but for some, that in pursuing those objectives, we may miss something else. That's the deeper risk. That something else is actualizing on some deeper longing for something else, to find ourselves, so to speak, to live some sort of an adventure that maybe reveals and capitalizes on our nature. It's tough to do both, because if you do exclusively the surface stuff, you won't have much time for the deep stuff. And if you do the deep stuff, that's going to take away time and effort, resources, etc., from the surface level stuff. And the tricky thing about the deep one is that not often society, although society tacitly admires that, especially those who succeed in doing something as a result, it also is suspicious and cautious. How are you going to support yourself doing that? and there's good reason for that, because it is a risk. That's why it's a risk. It's a deep level risk. So my formula that I recommend is to attend to the deep level risk early, in our 20s, and then later, after the 30s begin, after we've had our great life adventure, to come back in from the cold, worn, beat, bruised, broke, possibly dead. It's a risk after all. And then carry on building the rest of life. Sin and damnation. The sins in my worldview are as follows. The first is, and they mostly relate around to belief. Believing things without good reason, which is a foundational mistake that, scatters scatters us. The principles are, first, credulity, an overeagerness to believe, period. 2, hope, which is just a feigned longing without the motive force to make that longing real, a clutching of pearls. 3, faith, which is a category of belief wherein the simple fact of believing justifies the belief, which is no such justification. It's like a serpent swallowing its tail. It leaves us in the end consumed with nothing. The next sin is dogma, belief because it's written in a big leather-bound book, so to speak. And then authority, belief because someone in a position that has a big office with panels and a fancy chair and some letters after their name tells us it's true. And then finally gossip, which I've already talked about. The consequence of these sins is damnation in the here and now. Even if that damnation doesn't feel like damnation, we may feel quite satisfied that we're believing something that gives us comfort, even if it isn't true. Even if it isn't true, it comforts us. But for some, like myself, That's no comfort. I can see that I'm fooling myself. The next principle is complete oblivion. When we die, we're going to be completely gone. There is apparently no soul, no God, and no afterlife. So when we die, we will never see our loved ones again. No reunion. We will, as a consequence, never have a chance to reconcile if we've died on poor terms. No reconciliation. And without an afterlife and an all-powerful judge, there'll be no justice. So we have to seek after those things now. Reunion, reconciliation, and justice in the one life that we get. The next is the great life adventure. I already touched on this. This is that experience that we have. In some cases, it's best if you have it young. That becomes kind of a nucleus of ourselves that attends to that deep level risk of finding ourselves, so to speak, as the hippies would say. Building something and creating a story that is our own, that becomes us and carries us through life. Then comes the season of philosophy, a time to write our book, to put into words all the things that we found and discovered and we wanted to share with the world. When the words come, when the muse speaks, we better write, because she has a sense of a way of going away. Potentially leaving us with nothing because we didn't act. The next principle is the bullseye aim. Imagine a target. We strive for the mark, but we usually miss by some degree, greater or lesser. So be it. That's the way it is. That's all that is to that principle, is remembering that that's the case and not kicking ourselves so much when we miss. Next comes the uphill climb. Life is a steady marching climb, upward, upward, off we go. I've begun climbing the mountain behind our house every night after work. Mount Fortitude, I call it. It reminds me as I step up the mountain that life is the same. The higher we go, the more impressive the view. Sometimes also the colder it gets and darker, and the more susceptible we are to perhaps mountain lions in the dark. Almost done. The next principle is arena and utility. Life is an arena for the pursuit of our objectives, using our principles as the tools along the way. Next is nothing is enough. A simple reminder that we're sometimes so much better off with less. We certainly travel lighter, less distraction, and we remain more nimble to step lively upon the path of wildness. And then the last principle is the principle of fun, a reminder to enjoy our lives, to take time, to have a good time during these years, these days of our lives. All right, that's my Good Life Creed. 7 objectives, 30 principles. Now let's talk about the day. It's a Friday. I don't think I have any meetings today. I have a clear shot ahead of me. I have some speed bumps in my work, but I have a clear shot ahead of me. I'm going to spend the whole day today working on a training manual that I'm writing for one of my projects. And I'm going to see if I can finish I'm pretty sure I've already finished the first chapter. I think I can finish the second chapter today. I wonder if I could finish the 3rd chapter. I wonder if I could finish the whole damn thing. Wouldn't that be something? If I could finish the whole book today. And then start working on the actual delivery of the training next week. One of the things I'm going to be challenged with is that it's Friday night. I tend to really, by the end of the week, I really wipe myself out. So I'm going to be tired in the evening. It would be fun to stay up a little bit, and enjoy the evening. But it's just not something I do. I'm such a creature of habit when it comes to sleep. But I'm going to have a fun day, especially once work is done. And now I'm going to take the boys out for their walk. Thanks for joining me. I wish you all the best. Please remember to be safe, but not too safe.